Fantastic. Okay, great. Well, I'll just kick things off. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Power Platform Community High Five. We've got two amazing speakers on tonight, so really looking forward to this one. Just kick off briefly as well. We use the Microsoft Event Code of Conduct. Short version is we're just respectful and friendly to each other. If anyone's got any issues, I'm sure we won't with such a friendly bunch. Most of us seem to know each other already, but if there are any issues, just either speak with me or the official bouncer, which is Sarah Jones. Just hit us up directly. She's on mute, so she can't say anything. It's great. But yeah, just kidding. If there's any issues, just reach out anytime that you need to as well. So, yep, the sessions we've got tonight, we've got the fantastic Angeliki Patsiavou to start off with top authoring tips for Copilot Studio agents, and then the brilliant Juliana Smith uncovering the secrets of dashboard design. So unless there's anything else, I'll hand over to you, Angie, if you want to share the screen and make a start. Thank you.
It sounds like a plan. Let's do it. So has it shifted to full screen?
I've still got design mode there. There we go. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So Keith, Sarah, everyone, thank you so much for having me on today. I made sure to dress up the part. So it's all about Copilot today, right? And I'm really excited to bring to you this fairly new session. I've only run it a handful of times, but it's basically all of my wisdom gathered so far in terms of authoring agents. Of course, it's the hottest topic. So welcome on this journey of self-exploration, whether you're starting your journey with Copilot Studio, whether you're somewhere in the middle or you're very much focused on it. Hopefully you'll enjoy those tips and tricks. A little bit about me before we start. So I am very much all about the community. I've been doing the speaking journey, for 4 years or so now. And to be honest, it's because I'm a geek. I both love the community and I love all things CRM. So I found myself in the world of business applications in various careers, starting as a marketing manager and thus end user, then moving into change management and eventually becoming a functional architect. And throughout that, I realized how all these skills really bring the element of customer experience to heart and really bring up the passion in it. Originally, I'm Greek-Italian, hence why my accent is a little bit different, but I've been calling UK my home for over a decade. And outside of work and the community life as well, not only am I a full-time geek, but I love also martial arts and all things music and singing. You'll find me in the community as a business applications MVP and a speaker as well. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love meeting people, having all sorts of fun chats. Also, I've put my blog here, empoweredhumans.net. I would say take your phones out because there's going to be a lot of QR codes throughout the session to give you a good idea of all the tips and tricks that we're going to discuss. I have for most of them blog posts with step-by-step instructions, screenshot. It's all super visual, so you can also follow along in your own time if you want to explore some of the features. And also if you like movies, they're all movie themed, very cheesy puns, so it's going to keep you entertained regardless. And the other thing I wanted to mention, which is a fairly new Microsoft initiative, is the Agent Hero community. So this is a new initiative that was announced during Build, whereby Microsoft is inviting everyone to be an agent creator as well. And some of us are the starter heroes of the community, but in theory, everyone could be a hero. So if you scan the QR code, you'll see some of us that have gotten things started. You can find all sorts of cool content, recommendations, and whatnot. So it's definitely a good way to start experimenting, but also looking at some ideas from other people. Okay, I think that's enough about me. So let's have a start with some numbers. I did promise you I'm a geek. That includes data. And for that matter, I wanted to share with you a number that really stood out for me. I know we speak about AI and agents a lot, but this number from Gartner really represents the future. So they estimate, based on various research points, that 33% of enterprise software applications will include some form of agentic AI. Now, this is a big double-digit number, but it's even bigger if you consider that if we looked at last year, where we're still having a lot of AI discussions, but in their infancy, it was less than 1%. So this is a massive exponential increase in adoption and actual use. So it makes you realize that being a part of the conversation, being an active part, creating, understanding the technology, the right use cases, and also being part of the action ultimately is quintessential for you as a business to have that market, as for you as a technologist in order to be able to upskill yourself, but also evolve and so forth. So ultimately, this conversation is for everyone. Okay, but in the interest of time, let's get ourselves started straight away on these tips and tricks. And one of the topics that is really good to start with is the difference in how you look at your general design of the agent. And one of the first choices that you're going to make, both at an agent level, but also as you start designing the subparts of it, is the topic of classic versus generative orchestration. So first of all, and we're gonna shift between slides and demos just so you actually see these things in practice and not just do some deck by PowerPoint, no matter how pretty the visuals are. So let's cover first the difference between classic and generative orchestration. So obviously there's different kinds of agents, and the way we used to understand agents, it was in a very declarative way, and this is very much what classic orchestration does. You essentially provide certain data or certain knowledge sources to your agent, and then in a very declarative way, you explain step by step what you're expecting the agent to do. So, for example, fetch this kind of data from this document, analyze this piece of data from Dataverse, whatever that is. Don't take any creative autonomy in it. However, generative orchestration, hence why it's in the name, is where the agent becomes a little bit more creative, and it takes some of its own initiatives in a way, but it doesn't necessarily refer to autonomy either. So let's not confuse the two. We will see in a moment where we set this up in the agent, but naturally, and yes, I will make the cardinal sin and refer to licensing within the first few minutes of getting onto the call with you. It does have an impact on your message consumption. We're not going to go through the whole details, but I did want to raise the point of something which will seem like a very simple switch on or off will make a massive difference to your billing and how you consume messages. So I have some examples here, but there's a fantastic Microsoft Learn article where you have a table where per feature you see how much you'd be consuming in each scenario. So let's take the example of you already have your Microsoft 365 Copilot license and you're doing some cool things within it. Then you wouldn't be consuming anything extra. That's the time zero. However, if you go into an agent outside of that, then it's only one message consumption for classic orchestration. The minute you turn generative orchestration on, that's times 2. So you're already doubling up. And if you wanted to do something cool, like graph grounding in from your tenant, then that goes to times 10. Now that might seem like a lot, but in case you've been following on the latest, end of April, this got down to 10 from a staggering amount that it was originally up. So, we appreciate that it has gone down, but it's still a significant cost. Now, there's a lot more features that actually will increase or decrease your cost. But ultimately, the way to think about pricing for your agent is not a black and white answer. Think of it as a simple mathematical formula whereby you look at all the features that you're building, and then it's a mix and match. So for example, feature X costs this, feature Y costs that. So you essentially look at all the features to reach an outcome. Then there's some estimates about, let's say, average amount of users, average amount of interactions per month and whatnot. And that's how you get to an expected cost. And having an understanding of the intricacies of it. Not everyone needs to become a licensing expert, but ultimately having even a general awareness makes you appreciate that this is not straightforward. So every architectural decision we make has a very realistic business impact. And a bit of a side note that if you already set up your agent with one type of orchestration, let's say classic, and then midway through your kind of like journey with the agent, you decide, you know what, I actually want to experiment with generative. This is going to have an impact on your triggers and particularly on your message triggers as well. So if, for example, you started with classic and you were triggering your agent based on specific phrases, when you switch to generative, you'll see that disappear. That trigger type won't exist anymore. Don't be alarmed. This is expected. It's also somewhere in the documentation, not necessarily as prominently, but it's there. The reason why this happens is because in the classic way, it's very declarative. We say the messages that will trigger the topic. However, in generative, what will happen is the phrases you had will be translated in a descriptive way and say, trigger this topic based on this theme, this topic kind of like general umbrella theme, but it doesn't necessarily trigger in specific phrases. So it's essentially describing the theme rather than those triggers, and that's why you're not seeing them. And that's, I'm only saying it in case you panic. I did panic the first time I saw this happening. I thought it was an issue, but apparently it's expected. So let's have a quick look at this, and it's going to be our first quick demo. So let me take you to our tenant for the day. Of course, everything has decided to restart. Oh, God, I love technical glitches sometimes. But anyway, once this loads, what I did want to show you is the setting where you will set up your choice between classic and generative orchestration. So let's have a few seconds of patience, and then we'll load it up. Just as a background, the different demos that we're going to see today is part of a hotel booking agent that I have set up to essentially support customer services when you have your customer service representatives as the first line of support. So imagine you are either a prospect customer, is going through a hotel booking site, wants to self-serve, interacts with the agent rather than calling up or being in a live chat. But similarly, the agent can also support you, the customer service representative, so it's embedded in your CRM systems. So we'll see throughout the demos the different experiences. So here we're in Copilot Studio. We've opened up our agent. And what you're going to do, if you want to decide and set up ultimately your classic versus generative orchestration, you're going to go to settings, and it's going to be the first thing that pops up. So it's nice and prominent. And again, even though that's a simple switch, remember that there's actual consequences in terms of billing, but also the kind of features that you're going to interact with throughout your authoring. So as you can see here, classic versus generative. Cool. Let's go back to the slides and go to tip number 2. So tip number 2, and this is where our blog posts are coming up. There's different ways to format the output of the messages in the agent. Now, it's all about customer experience and how we make this like a really cool, engaging interaction between the agent and the user. Because remember, no matter where you are in the journey, you really are championing the end user. And as a business, you also want to be competitive in terms of the service that you offer. So there's a few options you have actually. The first one is native in Copilot Studio, and there's native formatting. And what I mean by that is the things that you would expect from something like a Word or PowerPoint, that kind of formatting will be there as well. Not all of it, but some of it. And we'll have a look at that. The other option, if you're into PowerFX, is to do that as well. So there's options to actually use this kind of expressions and to format your outputs. So let's say you are bringing some dataverse data through the agent in the interaction with the user. There's a lot more capabilities with the PowerFX expressions. Not all of it that generic PowerFX can do is available, but thankfully there's a beautiful Microsoft Learn article that explains the full list of available expressions within the agent. So ultimately you're not going blind. You can reference that. It's a pretty long list, to be honest, but it's also good to have that as a reference. And the third thing that you can do is to have, if you're working with flows, and let's say you're in a Power Automate flow that you've set up in the background, you can use something like HTML. So if you're working with a lot of data that you're bringing in from a flow, instead of coming in a very weird string kind of way, you can manipulate it in the backend in the flow. So when it comes to your agent, it's nicely structured. And we're going to see an example of that. I reckon we should just do it now. So let's do that again and go back to the demo. I know this is a bit untraditional to go back and forth, so I hope you're enjoying the ride as much as I am, because having 6 or 8 demos live is quite the trip. So, you know, if we're not mavericks, then what are we in this life? Okie dokie. So let's start off with the native formatting. So what you can see here is some of the native formatting options. So we have the ability to bold, just like you would in a normal, I don't know, like Word document, for example. You can bullet, you can number as well, you can do italics, so things that you would expect. The FX symbol is where you add the PowerFX expression. And I just wanted to give you an example of this. I did it in a separate topic just because that topic is already a lengthy one. But essentially, what I'm doing here is that I'm taking some data from Dataverse. So for example, in this case, the user is asking, what is the last hotel stays cost? So we're inputting it from Dataverse as raw data. So it's just a number, but we want to structure it in a way that has the decimal and the currency as well. So it looks nice. So if I were to ask the agent that and just have a look on the right, then what it will do is take that unstructured number, add my decimals, add my euro currency because it's recognized, let's say a Greek user, so I'm going to be using euros. And so it's really helpful for me to have that nice structuring. Now, if you're working with flows, then there's the option, as I mentioned, to use HTML. And let's have a look at that. So for example, if you're familiar and you're comfortable and you're into using HTML, what you can do is after the flow has loaded, because lucky us, everything has decided to reload. I'm going to show you 2 examples of using HTML. We are going to look at creating a table format, so an unstructured list, but also adding simple formatting like, let's say, spaces and whatnot, which is going to look familiar for those of you that have experimented in the world of HTML. So I'll show you an example. Don't be scared by the flow, by the way. I just like torturing myself in Power Automate, but kidding aside, it really helps to do the groundwork in the flow, so you don't have to worry much about the formatting. So let's find a few things that are formatted. Where is it hiding? There you go. So this is an example of an unstructured, the end of an unstructured list, which will show up as essentially bullets. So that's one example. Another one is in this expression, for example, I've added my spaces in the bulleted list to make sure that each value has, you know, bullet space, then go to the next bullet and whatnot. So these are little tricks. Obviously, there can be a lot more complication into this to show you how you can use different ways of formatting. However, you may wonder, can I do things cooler than this? Because you're probably itching to do something even cooler than just plain formatting. And you know what? I can't even blame you, because I think we can't do better than this. So if we move past this, there is another world, another door to open up. And this is the world of adaptive cards. I've been working on a series of content for adaptive cards. So here we have the first 2 blog posts, one of which was actually launched yesterday. And this is to get people some practical guides of getting started with adaptive cards, but also some visual kind of examples of it all. So adaptive cards is a great toolkit for creating that more engaging and interactive experience. So essentially richer media within your agent. And the first thing that is super helpful to get familiar with is what we call a designer. So Microsoft has invested on a great tool where you can design in a low-code way your adaptive card. So you choose your elements. So for example, I want a text block here, I want an image there, I want some action buttons, or I want to do a poll, whatever. There is a lot of resources that they've invested on. So there's this designer. There is a lot of GitHub samples that you can get started with if you'd like to do so. And generally a lot of work that they've put in to give you some new resources. Now, what I like about the designer that we're going to see in a moment is that it balances very well having pro code and low code together. So you can start in a very low code way, drag and drop your elements, define their properties. But what this does is that it also, in real time, gives you the JSON code for it, because this is all it is. It's a bunch of JSON lines. And in real time, as you define it in a low-code way, you see your JSON editor there populate. And this actually goes 2 ways. So if you do it in a low-code way, you'll see the JSON code populate in real time, which you'll eventually use to paste it into your agent. But the other way around works as well. So if you're feeling extra pro-devy that day, you want to work on the code and not do all the drag and dropping in the elements, or maybe you have a sample you've already worked on and you want to lift and shift it, you can do it the other way around. You can copy the code, paste the code there, or just work within the editor, and it will automatically and retrospectively populate in the low-code view the properties, which I think is brilliant. That 2-way relationship really balances the power of pro and low-code. And of course, it's not just about creating the card, but making it do something. So for example, when there is an interaction with the user, whether they are making some choices that need to go back into the CRM app, whether they're giving feedback based on a survey or a poll, whatever that is, we want to parse that data somewhere. And there's ways to do that. So we're going to have a quick look at this. But these 2 blog posts should really get you going in terms of this topic. And there's some samples that you can also work on as well if you want to download them. So what we're going to see, you can also download. Okay. Let's go back to our demo. Okay, so where is that little card hiding? Not sure why this whole thing decided to reload at the last minute, because this was very much ready to roll before the call started. But hey ho, that's fine. That is life. So let's just find where a card has been hiding, because I made sure I had everything ready for you all. But we do like a bit of last minute risk as well from the looks of it. Oh, maybe we'll just choose this topic. Okay, so we're very much working within a specific topic. Let's see how we get on time, because I would happily show you, once we go through all the tips, the end-to-end journey as well. So you can see how this essentially experience comes together. So again, remember, this is a hotel booking agent. I've used the example of Marriott. I'm not in any way associated. This is not in any way me being sponsored by Marriott, working with them. I just happen to love traveling. This was one of the brands I chose. and this will load any moment. Let's hope to our demo gods that they will be kinder to us in the next few seconds. But what I did want to show you is how the adaptive card looks like in the agent, and we're going to play around with the designer a little bit, if it may so chooses to interact with us. By the way, if you do have any questions, because we may run out of time for questions, put them in the chat, and I'll happily reply post this kind of session finishing. And also, you're more than welcome to reach out on LinkedIn, because we may run out of time anyway. So let's find our adaptive card. So what this adaptive card is doing whilst this is loading, it's essentially part of a hotel booking experience. And you know how they try to upsell you with things? So we're going to see an example of how this is happening. So just before the prospect customer is about to make their booking, they're asked, well, would you like to add on your booking like a nice welcome basket as you check in? And I don't know about you, but I do love some goodies. So I might be easily upsold on the matter. But this is essentially the adaptive card, and it's a very simple kind of binary yes, no, do I want to add it into my booking or not? If I do, it will be added into my booking details, the pricing, and I'll have that as part of my CRM record as well. So as we look into this node, and we click on the ellipsis, we can actually explore the properties, and this is where we uncover the designer I've been speaking about. So if you click on Edit Adaptive Card, this is where the designer comes in, but you can actually access the designer site as well, which is not connected to the agent. It's just a way for you to work on cards, and then you can lift and shift your code. But what this is doing here is showing you the low code versus pro code approach I was saying. So if you look to the left, you have all the different elements that you can add. In real time, you see your adaptive card populating here in the middle, which is pretty cool. You see a tree kind of design format of your components step by step. And if you select each, that's where the configuration in a low-code way of the properties appear. So it's pretty good to experiment there. But also, if you want to work where it says card payload editor, this is where your JSON code lives. And thus, if you want to make any changes directly there, they will be reflected back to the properties and the other way around. Another cool feature about this, oh, and at any point you can click on copy here and move it anywhere else, or just keep it in your notes and so forth. One final thing I wanted to show you, which I think is really cool, is that you can click on preview and it gives you a device simulation, essentially. Now, it's not telling you the device, but it's giving you the dimension. So how would it render, for example, on a standard width that is probably a really big screen like I have now, or maybe a wide one, which may be a tablet and things like that. So it's really helpful, and you don't have to think about emulation and whatnot. Not that it's stopping you from doing it, but it's a nice handy tool to have. And just to also point out, since I did say that it's important to also parse the data, it's not meant to just exist, is that you use a flow to actually action this. So I wanted to give you an example here. Let's have a look at the CRM app behind it all. So this whole thing is about adding a welcome basket, right? So the flow that is ultimately making the reservation, so that long flow we saw earlier, is actually writing the data back into our CRM app. In this case, it's a model-driven app, but it could be Dynamics as well, or anything else. So in any kind of reservation, once the user has made all the choices, including the welcome basket, the flow will actually write the value yes or no back into here. So we are working with two things, essentially. The action choices from the card, yes or no, I want to add this as a service or not. And then we have to host it. We have created a variable that will then be passed on to Dataverse to be hosted into a CRM app through a flow. So similar to how you'd create a flow to add a new row and map your values and whatnot, that's what we're doing. We're taking the inputs from the agent, and adding it into our CRM columns. Okay, let's go back to our slides. So the next tip is all about some quick things to know when it comes to uploading files as knowledge sources. The first thing to know, and by the way, this all exists in documentation, but these are some of the things that caught me out, is when you upload some files, awesome, by the way, works great. However, when the agent references them, so in your citation link, it strips out all the formatting. So if we, and we're going to see this, we're going to ask the same question, and the topic exists both in a in a PowerPoint file and a PDF file. And as you can imagine, very different formatting in both, right? It's stripping out the formatting, all the beautiful kind of aesthetic elements of it. So, and this is by default. There is a way that the PowerCut team has explained you can hack this, but it's a little bit more pro-dev to do this. So by default, you'll see this formatting being stripped, and you have to do a bit of extra work to change this. The other thing is that the size needs to be considered. So up to 512 megabytes, fine, no worries for a single upload. Otherwise, if it's bigger, you may have to consider other ways. So for example, if it should be hosted somewhere else, whether it's SharePoint or just another source, because it can't be directly uploaded. And the other thing is, this is going to sound crazy, but there's some enterprise solutions out there that are equally demanding. Each agent can only have up to 500 uploaded files. And again, it looks like a crazy number potentially, but you never know what use cases you have. So another limitation, and why when you're thinking of your architecture, but also future-proofing it, you need to consider how much your growth may look like in your knowledge sources. Okay, so next topic is about retrieval and summary of data. Whether you're working with Dataverse or maybe another source, you're working with a lot of different kinds of data. And I find it very helpful when you have a certain expectation in the agent of how this data should be retrieved. And what do I mean by that? The classic example, you have a booking of something. I mean, in this case, it's a hotel reservation, but hey, it could be a booking of a concert or a restaurant. And you have your booking number. It could be a flight as well. You have your booking number, but for the life of you, you don't remember some of the details. You don't remember maybe the date or how many parties you've included and so forth. And so you're thinking, well, I have my ID, my reservation ID. If I put it into the system, the agent should come back with a summary of it. But if you're not defining the output and the style, a few things could happen. A, it might not include the key data that the user may need. And B, based on how you understand the user or your customer, it may not abide to the styling or the tone of voice or the brand guidelines. And so having control or a certain input into how this data should be retrieved is pretty helpful. And this is some of the benefits that you need to consider, again, as part of your offering and your architectural journey. So this is one of the reasons why I love custom prompts and working with AI Builder, because you can have that control. The interface is pretty straightforward. You can also test the way it will behave before launching it into the wild. And so have this kind of input into the end user experience. And this can happen in multiple ways. You can do it directly in the topic, invoke the prompt, or you can also do it through Power Automate if it's part of a bigger picture and a bigger output. So let's have a look into what this means in practice. Okay, so let's go into a topic. And I want to show you how this is used in practice through the prompt. Okay, so I'm going to take you back a few steps, actually forward a few steps. So at this point, the user has made all of their choices, but in a different topic, they're just going to give a reservation ID, and we are expecting the agent to come back with this pre-configured style of a summary. So you just input an ID and you'll get that summary back. And this is where we're going to use the flow. But remember, even though this is done directly in the topic, nothing is stopping you from invoking it within your flow, for example. Which is pretty handy because you don't know where you're going to be in your kind of like authoring decisions necessarily from the beginning. And sometimes it's good to flex as well. So let's give it a second. Also, the Italian in me is giving me a sore throat sometimes because I talk too much. So I'm sure you wouldn't mind a few seconds of, let's say, waiting. But oh boy, is it taking its sweet time. You know what? Whilst we wait for it to decide to give us the time of day, why don't we interact with the agent directly, and you'll see the outcome, and then we can see how it's been authored in the background. So at least the agent is talking to us, you know, and I got my handy notes here so we can ask the question. So in this case, we're interacting. We have a question about a reservation, but what kind of question? So in this case, we want reservation details. And what we're going to do is just add an ID. And let's see what it does. So what it's going to do is give us a summary based on how we've executed the prompt in the background and how we've set up our lovely summary style. So we've thought about all the key details that a user would need, retrieving it from Dataverse and adding some styling into it, because I don't know about you, but being neurodiverse, I really need my focus on kind of like this styling. So it helps me having things that are in bold, especially when it comes to financial aspects and whatnot. So here we have all our lovely details that are coming through the way we've customized our prompt. And it's very easy for the user to focus on what they're looking for. So for example, if they had forgotten about their checkout date or how much they had paid, this is all very easily seen now. Let's try one more time to see if the topic behaves. Apologies. Sometimes you just have to work with what the demo gods have allowed you to see for the day. And I'm sure you can relate to that, right? Okay, we see something loading. So I'm feeling that we're gonna get somewhere. Yeah, I can see it here. Okay, so in this node, which is when the user has chosen to inquire about the reservation, we have invoked the prompt. Let's have a look at the prompt itself. So I know the Dataverse columns I'm working with. I know the styling that I want to have. And so I've customized this in the prompt and made sure that it's giving back the same to the user. So the agent does not include less than what I believe is important. And based on how you know your customers very well, then that's how we end up. Gosh, it's taking its sweet time again. But let's be positive. Okay, there we go. So as I promised, we're giving instructions essentially in the prompt. So we're saying when you get a number, which is a reservation ID, then we say the mapping into Dataverse and the specific column, give me these details. So there's a mix of wording and a mix of Dataverse columns are coming in. You can actually experiment with different models, which is really cool. And then if you click on test based on the different kind of like reservation IDs that I experimented with when I was setting this up, it will give you all the results. And this is very handy because you get a hands-on example before you even go into the agent. So it creates that extra confidence that what you're building is making sense, especially around your different records that lie within the app. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the star part is the bolding. Okie dokie. So let's go back into our next tip. And we might fly through some of them just in the interest of time and just to respect that we have a lot more speaking. Okay, so the next topic is, there's a blog post for, so don't worry if we don't go through it live end to end, is what happens when you want to give the user that feeling that they're being seen, heard, understood. What I mean by that is, I don't know if you've been annoyed by this, but I hate when I'm on a website or even interacting with any kind of agent and they don't seem to understand who I am, even though I'm very specifically recognizable. So for example, I've logged into my customer profile, or I've made an action, or I'm clearly on a specific website of a hotel chain. Like, I want to be understood and not have to give those answers again. So with that in mind, there's ways to pass on the context. It can either be user specific. I've given you some examples. I can be recognized through my customer profile that I've logged in, certain actions that I've taken on the website and whatnot. We can turn it on its head and say that the specific website is recognized and all its different parameters as the user has interacted with it. So this is where an example with Power Pages comes in very handy, and this is what this blog post is all about. And this means that you can also, based on the different characteristics of either the user or the website or the journey the user is on, that you can customize the next step in terms of its knowledge sources. And what this particular blog post is looking at is, again, the concept of the hotel booking, you have different properties that you're working with, and you can customize based on, let's say, the specific website a user is on, without them even saying anything, just because you've identified them, and answer based on a specific knowledge source. So for example, if you're on a property in London, then the FAQs for London only will apply. Or so for example, you're asking, what is the check-in time for this property? You didn't even say as a user what property you're referring to, but the agent understands you. You can either reiterate the understanding or just give the answer straight away, but ultimately this will make it even more accurate. The next thing is, and these are just general tips as you author more and more that I found very useful. Sometimes if you're using flows that are interacting with your topics and you are staggering some actions, sometimes adding a delay is helpful. So in one of the topics I was showing you where you're ultimately making a reservation, there's a lot of actions that you're asking for the agent to do as it's interacting with Dataverse. And especially as we know, flows are asynchronous, they take a few seconds. So give yourself some grace, add a delay of even a few seconds into your flow. That will mean that as it's interacting with the agent, it will essentially reach all the steps before giving the user unnecessarily blank answers. So just a little trick. Another one is, and we know this generally for flows, but it's even more important as we're interacting in the agents, the use of Fetch XML. When you're scouring through a lot of data, it's really helpful to hone in on what exactly you want to do. Improves the performance of your flow and ultimately gets to the answer faster. And talking about faster, this is why staggering some calculations and some messages between the agent and the user helps. So when I was making the joke that it's a bit of a sadistic flow that you saw earlier, it's not. I was just trying to do things in a more in smaller chunks because it processes it faster, but also it's easier for troubleshooting if something fails to see exactly where, for those unfortunate moments. Embedding your agent, that's another thing to bear in mind. Whether you're working, let's say, with, let's say, an app, whether it's an M365 or a Power App, how do you do it? There is a way where you can actually invoke it within the side pane, for example, of your model-driven app. if you hack the client API. Super easy. All it takes is a couple of web resources, blog post on the left, and the blog post on the right is how do you embed it within a Power Pages site. So, and I'm talking about a bespoke agent, not the native one in Power Pages. But also remember that there's a lot of native channels that Copilot Studio will allow you to embed your agent in. So plenty of choices within the Microsoft stack, but also outside of it. I will part you with two thoughts, two final things. The first one is, we've covered a few things here, but nothing replaces you really merging yourself and taking the flight with your agent and understanding how to do things. Also, apologies, that animation didn't work out. And talking about that, investing on both understanding flows more, but also the different languages that can help you manipulate the data and process it between the different kind of solutions. So for example, we've covered Power Effects, we've looked at JSON, Fetch XML, HTML. These are super valuable tools. And finally, understanding how variables and topics work and how you hand over, another very helpful thing. But ultimately, learning is a journey. You might start as a beginner. I also started as a beginner and I had no clue. So it was very much the dark side for me that I shaped, through the being deep in the trenches, my skills. And I realized that the real power comes from bringing people together on the journey, learning together, maybe even being part of the same community, doing what we're doing here today. So bring others with you, learn together, learn from each other. So with that in mind, thank you so much for giving me the time today. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I have a QR code here for the general blog, but also the playlist with all the Copilot Studio posts. And otherwise, thank you so much, everyone. It's been lovely. Enjoy the next session as well. And any questions you have, just reach out. Thank you so very much again. Keith and Shara, over to you.
Thanks, Angie. That was absolutely fantastic. And love the demos as well. Very brave, but it really paid off. They were awesome. Does anyone have any questions for Angie?
I just wanted to say thanks, Angie. That was brilliant. As always, nice to have you back.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Certainly is. If anyone does have any questions, just use the raise hand feature if you have anything. Lots of love in the chat, by the way, Angie. People are loving the presentation.
Oh, bless. Yeah, I'm definitely seeing some of the demo gods references. And what can you do? Such is life. We are brave enough to dare anyway.
Absolutely. I think you were asking for trouble. It was, how many demos were you going out there?
I mean, most of them worked out, so it is what it is.
I know.
Great. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions. I think you covered everything really, really well. So thanks again, Angie. Absolutely brilliant. If anyone does want to reach out to Angie afterwards, again, just feel free to connect with her on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to reach Angeliki. But I think now we're ready to hand over to Juliana. So Juliana, if you're ready, just feel free to share the screen and best of luck.
Okay, can you all see the screen now?
Yeah, design mode at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah, there we go. That's present mode now. So
great.
First of all, thanks a lot for everybody for joining my session today on uncovering the secrets of dashboard design. We're going to find ways to elevate our Power BI skills using smart and human-centered design. Before we dive into the content, let me just briefly introduce myself. So my name is Juliana Smith. My background is in physical oceanography. So I started my career in data science and ocean research. And I have now more than 15 years working with data and technology across different sectors. Since 2020, I specialized in Power BI and user interface design. And for the past 18 months, I have deep dived into WCAG and accessible design. Currently work as a reporting lead at Costain, and I have a blog called Smart Frames UI and a YouTube channel which is Accessible BI, where I share content on creating specifically project reporting and also accessible design. So today we're gonna unlock the secrets behind dashboard design and how we can guide our users to insights before they even realize they're looking for them. So the goal today is to go beyond visuals, and we want dashboards that feel intuitive and that actually drive decisions. And we're going to focus on 3 areas, which are design dashboards with purpose, hack human perception, and then enhancing interactivity and accessibility. So when we all think about dashboard development, there are many key areas we have to worry about, and we put a lot of effort, which is absolutely correct. So we all want to make effective use of Power Query to clean the data, prepare the data. We all also consider data model, so we have to build a clear data model and efficient as well. And then we also have DAX, so we need to consider, do we need to create calculations? Is the context right? Because DAX can be quite misleading if you don't understand the context. And we all worry a lot about that, and it's very much right so. And then once we have our report, we worry about performance. Is it refreshing? Is it rendering out the visuals in a timely manner? How can we make it better? And of course, we also have to worry about data quality, right? Is everything coming through? Is that right? Does it make sense? And we spend a lot of time trying to figure out all of these things. And often, even when we get all of these things right, we may end up with something like this, right? Panic mode. So you can see here that this design is not necessarily wrong. The data is not necessarily wrong, but the design is very overwhelming. It's very difficult to find what are the key areas that you need to focus on this specific page. You can barely read, the colors a bit all over the place. And if you have a dashboard that is overwhelming like that, it's very likely it's going to fail. It's not going to take over. People will not want to use because they would not know how to use. And this is just one of the examples of what happened when designs take a backseat. And that's why we have to consider effective dashboard design, which pretty much, first of all, we talk about simplifying complexity. So without a structure, the data can become quite noisy, as we just see. And when we have a well-organized dashboard, a well-designed dashboard, it will organize the information logically, and it will remove unnecessary clutter. So when we simplify the layout, when we simplify the design, we don't need to have everything on the same page. And that will make the insights instantly clear, and that will allow the users to focus on what actually matters. And then we have that when we effective design, right? So also help us to enhance storytelling. So numbers alone, so we have all those numbers, they actually don't tell a story, and design helps telling the story. So intentional layout, for example, color usage and data hierarchy ensures that the right insight will stand out, and that will make it easier for our users to grasp the trends and patterns that they need to see. And of course, dashboards should be usable by everyone. So that's where we, when we have effective dashboard design, it will also promote accessibility. So everyone, regardless of technical skills, as well as regardless of abilities and disabilities. So everybody should be able to understand and engage with information that is being presented in a report or a dashboard. And ultimately, a well-designed dashboard empower the users to make informed decisions and uncover opportunities, and of course, drive action. That's the most important. So it's like what you're taking away from that dashboard. So bottom line is pretty much effective design is about making data clear, engaging, and accessible for everyone. So now let's look into the first part of this session, that is designing with purpose. So when we talk about purposeful design, it pretty much ensures that our users will not only see the data, they will not only see all those visuals, but they will also understand. And when they understand, they will be able to make confident decisions. And when we focus on user-centric principles, they will help enhancing clarity, usability, and the impact of our report. So everything that was not in the first example, that we pretty much just dumped everything. We were very worried about the quality of the data. We did everything right. But when in terms of design, we did not focus on user-centric principles. And in terms of user-centric principles, there are some elements such as white space, alignment, and hierarchy and consistency, and they are fundamental to enable us to have a user-centric dashboard design. And these will naturally improve clarity, usability, and accessibility. So let's get started now talking about white space. If you have ever felt really overwhelmed looking to a cluttered screen, white space, or that is also known as negative space, is the remedy for that. So white space refers to the empty areas between elements. So instead of being wasted space, it actually provides breathing room, and that will prevent the dashboard from feeling overwhelmed. So we'll go with something that is completely cluttered, with not much space in between each one of the elements on the dashboard, to something that, of course, we're not going to add all the visuals at the same time, but there is breathing room. It's easier to look and understand what's happening, and we prevents our users to becoming to feeling overwhelmed. And to make the most of so that these are the areas that it's considered white space in between elements, and to make most of the white space, we should pretty much avoid adding all the visuals. So it's not because we can add 20 different charts in a page, it doesn't mean that we should. So simplify, just see what actually matters for each one of the page, each one of the tabs of your report. And then, of course, we can group related elements. We can use padding inside each one of the charts in a consistent way. And that will create a sense of balance and harmony in our report. And then we have alignment. Right? So alignment in user interface design refers to the arrangement of elements in a way that creates visual connection. So visual alignment, so we have here, like, well, let's put the arrow. So hook alignment will ensure a structure and logical layout, which will guide the users naturally through information. So when the elements line up neatly like this, it kind of creates a sense of order. When we look at the screen, we know where to look, what is the flow of information. And also, of course, it brings a sense of professionalism. And to achieve great alignment, we can use grid lines. We should maintain consistent spacing. So if you have two different visuals and we use the specific space, you keep it consistent across other visuals as well, not only vertical as well as horizontal spacing. So that is very important. And we also need to structure the visuals logically, right? So if you talk about information flow, we're going to make if we have these middle row here, that we have 3 visuals, we're going to make sure that the order that we place the charts in there makes sense to follow that flow following the alignment. So that is also very important to understand what you're going to place, because it will help you telling the story. And then we have hierarchy. So information hierarchy is the strategic arrangement of data based on the importance, and that will ensure clarity and easy navigation. So of course, dashboards and reports, they often convey a lot of information, but not all data holds equal weight. And hierarchy will help leading the user's eyes to the most important insights first. And this can be done through different ways. We can have bold headings, we can have per-minute visuals, or we can also make use of a strategic placement of key metrics. So that's something that we can look into in terms of placement, right? So for example, we have here on the top, that is the first level of importance in terms of hierarchy, and we can say that that will be the KPI. So that will be a strategic way to place key metrics right on the top. And then we also have like a second level of importance. So those visuals will add a little bit more depth, a little bit more details to our KPIs. And the third level will add more details. We can add historical data, trends. You can add perhaps, if it's applicable to your data table, with more details, give a bit more depth on what you're trying to report on. And to build an information hierarchy, again, we can do it through changing font size. We can have a color contrast, so you can have like bold colors to indicate that something is more important. And again, placement, where we're going to put, if it's like the KPIs, you're going to put them on the top, not spread across your page. And then we have consistency. So a dashboard should feel predictable and easy to navigate. And consistency will play a very important role on the dashboard experience, on the user experience. And consistency has to be applied throughout your reports in terms of layout, typography, colors, and interactive elements. And that will ensure that our users will not spend a lot of time trying to learn how to use a dashboard. They were not going to spend too much time guessing what is the functionality of each element on the page. And in terms of consistency, we try to use a uniform font size and color scheme. So that will help readability, that will help, as I mentioned before, font and color can also help building a hierarchy. And also standardized placement of interactive elements, so slices, title, navigation buttons. So whenever those elements are placed on the same space and the same place across different page, these will aid usability. And all of that will reduce the cognitive load, because we ensure a familiar user experience across different pages. Our users spend less time trying to figure out how a dashboard works and actually spending more time on what actually matters, which is getting insights of the data. So now that we have covered a little bit on purposeful design, we're going to talk about how people actually process information. Because one thing is you look at something, and the other is how do you process that? How do you understand it? And design is also about understanding how the human brain sees, scans, and interprets the data. So if we align our dashboards design with natural perception patterns, our dashboards will instantly be easier to understand and navigate. And that's how we're going to look in that's how we're going to look into now. So first, let's start with eye scanning patterns. So when we view dashboards, users naturally scan the screen patterns that are shaped like the letters Z and F. So as we can see here on the screen. And that means that by placing the most critical information, as we mentioned before, like key metrics or titles, along the path of these, along these paths that we see the F or the Z pattern, we will ensure that the audience will see D, so that which is the most important first. And this is based on how most of people in the Western read, that is from the left to the right. For the F pattern, it's commonly used for text-heavy layout. So if you have, for example, a blog. And the Z pattern is often used in visual hierarchies. So for example, when we build a dashboard, that can be very, very useful. So next, we have Gestalt principles, and they are a game changer when it comes to dashboard design, right? So Gestalt principles, so we have Gestalt psychology that is from the 1920s. It's based on the idea that people perceive visual elements as unified wholes rather than individual parts. And we're going to look now, so these principles tap into how our brain naturally organize visual information. And then if we manage to get a hang of it, if we can manage to understand, we can apply that to dashboard design. And that will help us build a more intuitive and user-friendly dashboard. So let's look into some of these principles and how we can use them. The first one is the figure ground or foreground versus background, which is the context or less, sorry. So brains separate elements into foreground, which is the focus, and background, which is the context or what is less important. And when we create a stronger contrast between key visuals or numbers and the background, which is will be the context, we guide our users to where to look first. So we're going to see like this is high contrast against this plain background. They're going to look at that first. So that is something that will improve accessibility and also ensure that high priority elements are seen. So what do you mean by that? So let's have a look here. So I have these dashboard that right on the top, I have in bold colors, the KPI cards, right? So you can see here. And because these KPI cards are in the purple and they are against a white plain background, they are standing out. Right, so they kind of screaming me first, and the first thing you look when you look at this dashboard, you go to the okay, what is that? And then the other example here we have on these line charts underneath. So first we have here solid line and a dash line, right? So we have here the actual line is solid and the forecast, the baseline is dashed. So our eyes naturally draw more into bold elements. So we're going to naturally get into look first, the solid line. And this happens because our brain prioritizes these bold as well as continuous shapes over fragmented ones. So I want on that one to give a bit more. What matters most on that line chart is what actually happened, is my actual start, is my solid line. And then we also have the contrast, right? So the actual start line, which is the solid, has a stronger contrast against the background. So it's this purple against the plain white background. And these will reinforce that is the role of this line is the figure. It is the foreground. And the baseline line, which is dashed, the color, it is blending more with the background. There is less contrast between the baseline line that is gray and the white background. So these are different ways that we can play with contrast to kind of separate what is figure and ground, or foreground and background. And we also now, in terms of Gestalt principle, we have something that is grouping. So our brain naturally seek patterns and connections. That means that elements that share visual attributes, which, for example, color, shape, and size or style, they are perceived as belonging together. And these will help the users to quickly recognize patterns and relationships. So here is an example of grouping by similarity. So we have here the color coding. So we have green for male and purple for female, and that is used across different visuals. And we will certainly think that everything that is purple is female, everything that is green is male. And we also have here shape and style. So we have here two donut charts, and they have the same design, they have the same shape, and that kind of reinforced that they are connected as related metrics, right? And then you see here, oh yes, they are average ratios, and then one is for female and the other one is for male. So that is how we can use also similar shapes to kind of indicate relationship. So next, we can group by proximity. So when we design our reports and dashboards, well, we can place related metrics, charts, and slices close to each other. And when we do that, we help our users to understand that there is a connection between those elements, between those charts. And that helps our users to kind of understand that without putting too much effort. And here is an example. So we have the cards that we have primary JPI, secondary, and tertiary. And on the bottom, we have two metrics together. And because they are together, we kind of, okay, they are about the same, they are related. One is for female and the other one is for male. So that helps understanding that they are related. And again, we have here the donut charts again, and the way they are placed by the side of each other also signal, despite they also have the same shape, because they are positioned close together, it also signals straight away that there is a relationship between those two. So it may be the same metric, but it is now, you can see that it's a ratio for female and male. And we also have here the logical flow, right? So we have the donut chart as the average ratio for female and male, and right close to it, we have column chart along time. So we understand, all right, so that means that it's going to be the average per year for male and female. So that helps the users to kind of associate the trends and average. So it's quite interesting to build something like that, because it also helps you telling the story behind the numbers. And another way of grouping is grouping by enclosure. So, and our mind prioritize this principle over all the others. So enclosing elements. So for example, we can see here that can be done through containers, shaded backgrounds. When we group those related elements, it will straight away tell our users they are related, they are together. And that a very good example we have, again, let's get back to the KPI cards. Everything related to the primary JPI, it is contained within this border. So that all the values that within these cards, they are related to the primary JPI. Even when we go here to the average ratio female and male, it doesn't say the word JPI, but they are within the same borders. We know straight away without much need to think that they are related. So that is a very powerful way to group elements by enclosure. And we also have grouping by connection. So when we have elements that are aligned along a line or a curve, they are perceived as part of a continuous pattern or trend. So lines, arrows, or linking elements can show relationship between data points. And when it's well implemented, users will, in a very intuitive way, follow the data flow without any need of any extra explanation. And a very good example is when we have line charts. So we have different data points, and because they are connected with the line, we naturally understand that it's showing progression over time, because of course we see here the x-axis is the month. So we don't need to tell anyone, they will naturally understand what's happening in front of them. And that's because we are grouping by connection. So a well-designed interactive dashboard engages our users because it gives them the ability to explore data on their own terms. So that's what we're going to talk about now, about interactivity and accessibility. Accessibility is also a critical factor because ensure that all the insights are available to everyone, and including users who with disabilities. So let's talk about interactivity. How can we create a more engaged and interactive report? And there are various ways we can do that. First one is very common, is through the use of filters and slices. So that customizes the user experience, right? So the filters and slices allow the users to refine the data that they see, and that will ensure that the insights are tailored to their specific needs. Next, we have the use of tooltips. So tooltips are great for providing additional details when you hover over visuals, and that is kind of perfect for adding information, for adding depth without adding clutter. But there is a big issue with tooltips. So tooltips are not compatible with screen readers, and that can limit accessibility for some of our users. So we can overcome that by using alternatives. So we can add, for example, a button, and that button will have alternative text. And that means that the user, even if they rely on the screen reader will read out loud what is the alternative text. And that way we ensure that all the users can access key information. The next one is drill through. So drill through means go deeper. Drill throughs empower our users to explore different layers of the data without overloading the main view of the dashboard. So we don't need to add those 20 different visuals in one page, right? So that will help creating a seamless storytelling experience as well. Just something that's very important to note, we need to educate our users. They may not know how to use a drill through. So make sure they understand that functionality exists and how to make use of it. And then, of course, intuitive navigation, right? If you have any links in your report that to move across different pages or to perhaps to go to another report, everything has to be obvious. They need to know that those are buttons, those are call for action. And there is something that we call it in UI design that is affordance, that we're going to make it very clear. There is a very distinct look for those interactive elements, and that is going to help your users in the experience when they explore your dashboard. And when we integrate interactivity to our report, we help our users to quickly find and act on the insights that they need to act on the insights that would drive success. Then we have accessibility. That is something that I'm really passionate about because I had a really bad experience with a stakeholder that I did not know that was colorblind, right? And that actually was the reason why I started learning about digital accessibility. So when we design dashboards, we also need to make sure that we are creating inclusive experience for all our users. And accessibility plays a critical factor in ensuring that the insights are available to everyone, including those with disabilities. And in Power BI is very good. There are some built-in accessibility features that help us creating more accessible reports. But there are a few things that we need to have in mind. First of it is support to screen readers. Power BI is by default compatible with screen readers. But as developers, we have to make sure that any non-text elements that will include graphics and icons, they have alternative text and they are also correctly labeled. So that means when that is done correctly, the users that rely on screen readers, they can fully comprehend the dashboard's content, even if they cannot see the whole thing. And then we have the use of high contrast themes. So improving readability is very important, especially for users with low vision, right? And we can take, if you want to have some kind of parameter to say, am I using a good contrast? We can use the web content accessibility guidelines that have different criteria, and you can look into the color contrast. And we should aim for at least the level of compliance AA. That is the most commonly mandated in terms of legal compliance. And when we follow that web content accessibility guidelines, that's known as well as WCAG, for regular text, which is up to 17 points, the color contrast ratio between the text and the background should be of 4.5 to 1. And if we have large text, which is above 18 points, or if in bold, above 14 points, the color contrast ratio should be of at least 3 to 1. And we should also consider color contrast ratio between the colors we use in our graphics and the background. So for non-text elements, the color contrast ratio should be of 3 to 1. So if you have a really light background, you're not going to use a very light gray on your chart because there is not enough contrast. And that is something that it's very common. I've seen many designs that use a very dark background and very dark data colors or fonts, or the other way around, very light background and very light everything else. And that is the worst thing you can possibly think of doing. Next up is avoid color-only indicators. So there are some vision impairments, as I mentioned as well, like color blindness. And that means that the users may struggle to interpret the data if the only distinction is color. So for colorblind, for example, they have difficulties to differentiate between certain colors. And the most common type of color blindness, it is the red and green color blindness, which means that they cannot see much of the difference between those two colors, right? And in reporting, we absolutely love using red, amber, and green to report on progress and performance. And that is, if you use those colors and nothing else to differentiate them, your reports will pretty much become useless to who may be colorblind. And that happened to me. So I've experienced that firsthand. So if you had to use the color, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure there are other ways of differentiating those colors. We can add labels, we can add icons, alternative formats. So for example, you can run a color blindness simulation to find colors that go together without causing accessibility issues. And I've done that in the past. It was a heat map using red, amber, and green. And I created a toggle button to give it to an alternative view. And the colors used were not red, amber, and green. They were accessible colors. They could see the difference. And there was also a legend, because for me, it may be navy blue, but they may see it different. So I put the color and said that means good progress, good performance. Next is keyboard navigation. So not all users rely on mouse, and Power BI is also by default compatible with keyboard navigation. From our side, we have to make sure the interactive elements, so if you have slices or links, they are accessible via keyboard and shortcuts. So make sure you don't get trapped, you don't get stuck in one element without being able to move around. And the other thing that's very important is tab order. So tab order is how we're going to navigate. If you hit the tab key on your keyboard, it will show how it moves across your screen, and it should be in the same order that our users are intended to consume the report. And you can do that task, and if it's not in the right order, we have to manually adjust that. I have a video on YouTube that's really good. I show exactly what I'm trying to explain. It makes it easier to understand, and it's something that within less than 2 minutes we can do it. It's very simple. And that simplified tooltip. So as I mentioned before, tooltips don't work very well with screen readers. So consider adding buttons with alternative text. And these alternatives ensure that important insights are not missed. Next up is use clear fonts. So stick to simple, readable fonts. They are easy to process. Avoid overly decorative styles, because they can reduce clarity for some users. In terms of font size, try to use the minimum size should be 12 points. Do not go below 12. I know it's very tempting to use 9 points, for example, especially if you're having data labels or axis labels. But that's not only gonna it's not only gonna be bad if you have a visual impairment, but also if you have users who may use a smaller screen to view your report. So you're going to cause a lot of problem for them to see if you go below 12 points. So try to stick to 12 points. And when we integrate, so just to wrap up the accessibility, when we integrate all of these practices, we create the dashboards that are usable and inclusive, and they also improve the overall user experience for everybody. So let's just go through a quick layout tips and wrap up this session. So when we design the dashboard, layout plays a really, really important role. So organizing elements in a strategic way will ensure that our users can navigate information easily and focus on the insights. And here are some of best practices for page layout. The first one, top for key insights. Place titles, summary metrics, or high-level KPIs on the top, because it will give immediate visibility. And if you remember, it is on the eye scanning pattern as we discussed before. But that's the best place you can put your important high-level KPIs. Next is left for navigation. So left-hand navigation is a commonly used design pattern in websites, right? So if we have filters and page navigation, everything on our left-hand side, we're used to it. We'll look at that space and understand that there is a navigation that we have to interact with. So again, you could position filters, slices, menu options, navigation, and alternatively, you can also place slices, for example, on the top right. But you just have to make sure that it doesn't look cluttered. So if you only have a few slices, you can put on the top right. Just try to future-proof your report. If you think the number of slices may increase, it's better to start your design with the left-hand navigation. Next is center for visuals. Add a bit more of details about your KPIs. This, as I mentioned before, is the second level of importance in your report. And finally, the bottom for trends, details, historical data. And very important, limit visuals per page. Use between 5 to 7, no more than that. And keep in mind that if users cannot find the insights under 5 seconds, you have lost them. So let's move away from a chaotic design to a streamlined layout, right? That will ensure that it's clear, it's got a purposeful placement, everything will kind of, when we have the strategic placement, it will automatically make your dashboard clear and easier to understand. We can also make sure they use consistent spacing and white space to give it breathing room, to make it easier for people to look at your report and actually understand what's happening. And then we have visual hierarchy. Again, you look at it, you know what are the key information to take away. And by also using good color contrast, that will not only highlight key areas, will also be very important for accessibility. So dashboards are more than just data display, right? They are our chance to guide and empower our audience. And by designing with intention, we shape how our users interact with information, and that will create clarity and focus. Leveraging how we naturally perceive visuals allow us to lead our audience without effort, and that will connect them with the insights that they need. And remember, when you show less, you say more, and you leave no room for noise, just meaningful, impactful insights. And with these principles in mind, we are ready to create dashboards that don't just deliver data, but they drive understanding. For more on accessible design, feel free to follow my blog and my YouTube channel. And let's move from design fails to design wins. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Juliana. Just a quick comment, say thank you. That was brilliant. Really, really good session. Sarah?
Yeah, no, I totally agreed. That was really interesting. The kind of perception thing for me as well was really interesting. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Shamim asked a question. Can you see the chat, Juliana, or do you want me to read it?
Oh, the can see style, is that the one, the F style of raising aligns very well with left-hand navigation? Is that that?
No, I think that was more recent. So further up, Shamim Munshi was asking the kind of the future of the role of a BI developer with AI. Would you suggest someone in that sort of role would look more into engineering or data science or management, or switch into a different technology?
I think it's a bit too soon to say if you're going to switch on your technology. But the way that I see AI as an ally. Sorry, I don't know why my camera is off. I see AI more as an ally than a competitor. I think we have to make sure we understand how AI can leverage our skills and how it can leverage us creating better dashboards in terms of, I don't know, perhaps will help optimizing our DAX calculations. It may help us understanding. There are now some color contrast checkers that give theme generators, right? They give you ideas of better themes or make work. So I wouldn't worry. I'm not worried at the moment. And there are a few elements of dashboard development that if you fully automate that, it's not going to work. And I'm 100% sure of that. And the most important is, for example, AI for gathering requirements, right? The users, they don't know what they want. So just starting from that, it's not an issue. You have to have a person. So you have to design, I think you have to focus on improving people skills, because that will set you apart from AI. The ability to talk, the ability to understand people will set you apart. And that's, I think it's very important. Sometimes it's underrated. in the data world.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think people skills are paramount to pretty much anything in life, but yeah, some things just aren't replaceable at the moment. Excellent. Any other questions from anyone else? Just feel free to use the raise hand. Lots of nice comments in the chat there, by the way, Juliana, which is good. Hi, Kieran. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you for my very first user group experience. So yeah, it's been a good one for me.
Thanks, Kieran. Yeah, glad you could join us. It was nice speaking earlier today as well.
Thank you.